Okay, it was a bit of a different situation tonight on several counts. Deb Luce is tending to relatives who have been going through surgery, and Paul is back from Egypt. And normally our presenters sit quietly and wait until it's their time to start talking, but you can't tie Paul down, and he's already been talking about his experiences for 15 or 20 minutes. So I don't think we want to do any further long history for Paul. We just need to let him loose. So, Paul, would you like to go ahead and offer a prayer, and then you, as the presenter, can begin.
Let me see if I have successfully unmuted, in which case I am learning. It's only taken me 6 years to be able to figure out how to do that. But I've got a lot more things to keep on learning. And so you'll see undoubtedly this evening that my clumsiness retains in some respects. But I have a story to share with you this evening that I'm anxious to share. And so let me go to the screen share and we'll get to prayer and get underway. the, if I have the picture, don't have the picture up yet. Slideshow. Yeah, the picture is taken from Mount Sinai, from the top of Mount Sinai, and that grin on my face is because I made it. But I'll tell you about that next week. This week, I'm going to be sharing with you about the experience in Egypt. That is pyramids, museums, Karnak, Abu Simbel, and a lot of little fun experiences in between. And next week, I'll plan to come back with the phenomenal experience I had on Mount Sinai, and then also at Petra, the city carved out of stone. So that's the plan. So I'll end. I am in hopes that there will be some of the people who are part of the Habibi family that toured with me that will get on, and if so, then I want them to feel free to jump in and um, participate with any questions or comments. But we'll get to that first. Let's have the prayer first. Let's pray together. And you're looking at Abu Simbel on the right. Great God of history and its mystery beyond time, we bow in respect, seeing a bit of your creations, beautiful, integrated, enduring, and sublime. This evening, as we consider the story of Egypt, an early civilization along the Nile, we ask for your spirit to help us appreciate your view of the gods they worshipped, and that we tend to revile. We want to comprehend you. We want to understand. We seek to grasp the blessings of your most generous and forgiving hand. Yet we see in ourselves the juxtaposition of the crocodile and the bee, the fierce consumer with little mercy, and the potential to be a honey tree. So this evening, as we look at Egyptian history with its ties to so much modern mystery, the gods of nature, human works sublime, we ask the expansion of our perception that we apprehend beyond our own time to better appreciate you, the ultimate divine. In whose name we pray. Amen. The view there of the Sphinx will come up again later, and so close that one and stop that share and open a new share, which will be, where is it? So click to exit. All right. Clearly, I had things stacked on top of each other. And where are they? Oh boy. Now then, I think I have Soldiers Step Pyramid in front of you.
I believe so.
Okay, this is the oldest of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, 2700 BC. It it marks the beginning. Well, it's the third dynasty in the Old Kingdom, and so it marks the beginning of great pharaohs who were big egos who wanted people to build monuments for them. And the more I looked at the hundreds of pyramids through Egypt to see the remarkable sacrifice that people have made in order to build the monuments for these big egos, the more I found the egos to be unsavory. I so much prefer to see people being fed, and there's something about building big monuments out of stone that you can't eat very well. But anyway, it's a phenomenal construction. It's about 30 miles west of Cairo, but it's on the west side, the west bank of the Nile, which is the bank of the dead, and the east bank, then is the bank of the living. And you can see that it is a construction of rather significant size stones. And the fact that it dates back that far struck me as fascinating because I had taken my brother David to Poverty Point in Louisiana, and Poverty Point dates to 2700 BC, same time. Poverty Point, we had the concentric circles of a planned hunting and gathering village where people lived together in peace for 500 years. And here we have the Zoser Pyramid, which speaks of the beginning, really the beginnings of the Old Kingdom, in which pharaohs had to be buried under these huge monuments, and that was presumed to contribute to their afterlife. But you can see the construction here, just a lot of work to be able to put even the base together, and for it to build up and build into the layers. Um, there's still some controversy over how the building was done, but I did see in a couple of places where the mud bricks had been used to build the ramps that were used for sliding the big stones up on these big monuments. Now, one of the interesting things that struck me was that having these pyramids was a pretty good indicator to the robbers about where to go dig to look for treasure. As a matter of fact, they were very significant landmarks through the Old and Middle Kingdoms. It wasn't until we get to the New Kingdom, that's when we have Seti and the Ramses series, that they moved to the Valley of the Kings, and they they hid their tombs much better. And so 125 of those tombs have been uncovered, and I got to visit three of them. So I'll get to that story later. But you can see the hole penetrated in the wall here of the soldier's tomb, where the pirates have gotten in to go poking around and trying to find out just what all has been buried here. What can we salvage? What can we harvest? And so the thieves have been in virtually all of the big pyramids to harvest what they can, and so they have been largely despoiled. However, there are some times when they would put the tombs apart from the pyramid, and so at Zozer's we do have a tomb apart as well. And so getting into that and seeing the hieroglyphs on it is really quite a striking and neat opportunity. Um, Fascinating to see that the ongoing work shows that well, in April of this last year, 2025, the archaeologists led by Dr. Zawi Hawass uncovered the tomb of Prince Wazir Il Ra Ray, who was one of the early sons of the dynasty. And this tomb features a pink granite false door measuring 4.5 meters in height and 1.1 meters, including the hereditary prince, the royal scribe, the vizier, the chanting priest, and well, the pink granite default's door is very unique, and so it signifies the high status. But see, there's the ongoing excavations. This is 2025 that was found, and they've been finding. I just was amazed to read afterwards that they have been finding just about every year more tombs, more sarcophagi around these pyramidal structures, and so the archaeology is ongoing. Here's the interior of that tomb, and you can see that all the walls are covered with the hieroglyphs. These Egyptians didn't leave any undecorated spaces. They really wanted to make sure everything got decorated. And so it was fascinating because our guide, Ahmed, is competent to translate 95% of the hieroglyphs. And because of that, then to be able to have him focus on to be able to read what's on the wall to tell the story, just phenomenal. That comes largely from people having studied the cartouches. And here you see a couple of those circular, that is, yeah, the ovals are cartouches. And the cartouches would have the name of the royal person in it. So once you break down the nature of the cartouches, then you have symbols by which to understand the nature of the script. And that's how Champollion, back in 1805, was able to use the cartouches to help, and then the two other languages on the Rosetta Stone to begin breaking the hieroglyphics, and now they can be quite commonly read by many educated people. I'm not one of those, and so please don't anticipate that, but I certainly was impressed to see that our guide was. Mud bricks. Mud bricks. Such a fundamental foundational architectural material. Those mud bricks are a basic building material for Egypt. Mud bricks and stone. And I was amazed to discover the intermingling of them, sometimes finding the mud bricks on top of the stone, and sometimes finding the stone on top of the mud bricks. So just amazing to see the utility of these construction materials. Annika, in the first one here, is our guide for the group of museologists that made this trip, and I want to give her credit because she did a marvelous job of putting together the whole plan. They kept us from hardly getting any sleep, and it was well, I didn't get a full night's sleep from the end of December until about the beginning of February. So I'm still recovering. But here you can see one of the sides of the step pyramid, and just it's big. There's just so much work on it. You see larger stones facing, but the facing stones have largely been removed, so that you have the interior stones being exposed, and so therefore the desert is wearing them down. On that same day, we got to visit a carpet factory, and the little girl in yellow here had such quickly moving hands. You see, there's a design up above them. They are putting that design in the carpet that's down below. And so they bring the right colors down the right place and pat them into place. And oh, just phenomenal workmanship. I was just really impressed. This is a family working together, and they had a lot of kids involved, so OSHA would not be pleased, but the family was able to put together a career for their kids by giving that kind of early training. And then on that same first day to the pyramids and to see the big pyramids. Clearly, that's one of those things that a person who grows up in Iowa sort of dreams of and never anticipates actually being able to have happen. You teach about the rise of civilization for 40 years and then finally have a chance to go see it. It would make so much more sense if we would allow our teachers to go see places like that before they have to try to teach about it. But it's certainly gratifying to get there at any point and to appreciate that these pyramidal structures that are on the outskirts of Cairo are being preserved. You'll see you've got desert all around. They have cleared about 5 square miles around the pyramids to keep that area basically pristine and in the desert condition. And so there you see the three pyramids together. The Giza Pyramid Complex consists of the Great Pyramid, which is also known as the Cheops Pyramid or Khufu, and then the slightly smaller Pyramid of Khafre, and then the third pyramid is Menkaure. And so it's just a fascinating comment. And then you got the little pyramids, which were built for their wives. And so you got more of those back here in the background. So it's really quite a complex. And as I indicated, there's hundreds of pyramids built for these big egos of the old and middle kingdoms. And by the way, I'd be happy to have your interruptions and questions as we go along. So feel free if you have a question or comment. Here is a map of the complex. So you can see where the Pyramid of Khufu, Pyramid of Khafre, and Menkaure over here. And then the Sphinx is down here. And so from the Sphinx, you can see the Pyramid of Khafre behind it quite clearly. It's a remarkable complex. And well, yeah, it's the fact that Herodotus identified it as highly significant. Herodotus was there BC to identify it as one of the great accomplishments of humankind. Oh, and let me call your attention. There's boat pits back here. Here's the Pyramid of Khufu, and close to that pyramid, they have the boat pits. I'll be talking about the boat here a little bit more, because to me that was a phenomenal development in the overall tour. Herodotus, I think, was there at about 400 BC, and he was trying to remember what the. I think he was told that it had taken 3 month shifts of 100,000 men at a time to build that pyramid, and clearly it needed to be built in the lifetime of the pharaoh. And so we're talking about 20 to 30 years to build such a pyramid. And the claim from the Egyptians is that it's not done by slaves, it's done by trained workers, so that it would be done accurately.
Paul, did you mention going into the underground burial place?
No, I'm going to coming up. Well, maybe no, I didn't. Yeah. Go ahead. You want to say something about it, Jeannie?
I just enjoyed going down in there, realizing that we had to go in under all those great big rocks, and the entrance was only maybe 4 feet high. So all of us tall people, myself included, we had to duck down under in order to crawl through this space. When we got down to the end, there was like a waiting room, and there were probably 40 people in that room, all of them looking toward the area where the coffin would have been. And of course, all of that burial material had been taken out. But you know, it looked to me like a pig trough. I'm sorry to say that, but it was very narrow and not very tall. And it may have been a child's tomb. I don't know. But it had, in order to hold it up and keep everything in order, there were pieces of wood, poles of wood that were holding the structure together. And all around this room, all through the room, were the hieroglyphs of probably this person's life. You could read some of them, or if you see them at all, you would recognize that there were some that were the same. And in this picture, if you look above the right hand where the there's a big hole up above here. I think that's the entrance that we use to get into the inner part of the pyramid.
That's the one that the tomb robbers used. We did not get in there. They had that barred off for us.
Was ours down in here?
Ours was down lower.
Okay.
And the wood logs, I think, were actually made out of stone to look like wood.
Okay.
And Boyd, do you have a hand up?
Yeah, Paul. What did your tour guides or what did they tell you over there? How they build them, or is because that's I've heard the stories changed a little bit over the years. So I wanted to know what your theory is.
Well, our guides were very clear that it was the ramping process by which the pyramids were built, and we did see pyramids that did have the mud brick ramps remaining that hadn't been totally removed. So there's very good evidence that that was one of the strategies used. All right, moving on. An old picture of the Sphinx as it was buried, and then interesting that the Sphinx got uncovered, and the story of its uncovery is fascinating. So I'll get to that here in a moment. But you can see the big pyramid behind it. The face is presumably consensus among the Egyptologists is that it's the face of Khofre, the same person for whom the big pyramid was made, and so the fact that his nose has been obliterated, Napoleon's army is cited for that, and it may very well be, but it's not. That may be mythology too. Come on, let's click. It's a substantial construction down in the valley a little bit below the pyramidal structures, and just the head was sticking up initially, and then there's a dream stele between the Sphinx's front legs that was put there around 1400 BC, and it records the claim, the dream that Pharaoh Tutmos, I think it was Tutmos the Fourth, had the dream that said that the Sphinx told him that if he would clear the sand bearing his body, he would become the next Pharaoh. So he cleared the body out from the sand, made it so we could see the rest of the Sphinx's body, and he became the Pharaoh. So that's at least good propaganda by which to have him be able to establish a marker here to say, I am a legitimate Pharaoh. But look, that's 1400 BC. It's just interesting to see how the significant history here is thousands of years old. Just a massive structure, and you can see that it's cut out of the limestone. There's that limestone bed that reaches across the whole region and then is divided by the Rift Valley. I found it intriguing to see the old and the new working together here. I also got a poor picture of a big jet going by the Cheops pyramid, but I found this one. Steve Slade has helped me pull slides together, but out of 3,000 slides, there's quite a lot that you're not getting to see, of course. But here you get a vantage point of the crowds that throng around that area. I am moving now to this is the Civilization Museum. We saw three awesome museums in Cairo. And this one really struck me because these are Acheulean hand axes. And I had shown pictures and made models of Acheulean hand axes for my students over the years. But to find that here they had 12 of them on display in this one display. These are the hand axes that began to be used about 500,000 years ago by our human ancestors, the Neanderthals, and then later humans as well. And they're choppers, they're scrapers, they are They are multi-purpose tools that have withstood the test of time as being one of the more effective tools in human history. And to have that at the beginning of the Museum of Civilization was striking for me because, wow, to talk about 500,000 years in Egypt, that's that's so far beyond most of our ability to comprehend that it's just amazing. And I wanted to get the picture because, well, we had three excellent museums that we got to spend a good deal of time with. The first is the new Cairo Museum that was opened in November last year. And it has this Pharaoh's boat in it. And the Pharaoh's boat was dug up beside the big pyramid and transported to this new museum. And they discovered the boat back in the 50s and have carefully excavated it and preserved it. And it's 144 feet long. And well, you see the oars back here. It would have had men handling those oars. The oars are big, clumsy things that took a good sized guy to handle. But I was really quite impressed with that. That's one of 13 exhibits in that museum. Here I got a picture from history that shows the transporting of that museum, of that barge, that boat of the Pharaoh from the pyramid. They loaded it and made a special carriage for it, covered it, surrounded it with metal to protect it, and moved it along. I think it took them about a day to move it the 10 miles to the museum. And of course, the museum is now new, and so it's well situated and being preserved. But just fascinating to see the interest and care that the Egyptians have for trying to preserve significant items like this. And inside, then you see the hieroglyphs show lots of pictures of the boats, but until they actually dug up one and found how big it was, to have it approaching 200 feet long was just phenomenal. And to find one that was still intact was just remarkable. And so, but it just speaks of how much the navigation of the Nile was being accommodated by people 5,000 years ago. There you can better see the oars and the side of it. Just a remarkable restoration project to pull that 5,000-year-old boat up and have it still be in such good shape. And here we have the Narmer pallet. It's an ancient engraved stone. It's a tablet dating back about 5,000 years, and it's believed to be the marker of King Narmer, who was the first ruler to unify northern and southern Egypt. Upper Egypt is in the south, Lower Egypt is in the north, and the Nile carrying the water from the south to the north has deposited at Cairo. And so the people who were at Cairo, which earlier was known as Memphis, tended to be the rulers going up into Asia. And then there are other powerful rulers in the Nubian area back where Aswan Dam is built. And so to get those kingdoms united was apparently first done by Narmer, and then we have a whole series of pharaohs who have to try to maintain that remarkable account. And when we get to Ramses, we'll get more of that story. But it's just a really fascinating set of displays in that new museum at Cairo. There's 13 major displays, 13 major rooms, one just for that boat, and then there's 12, 3 for the early period, then they go 3 for a little bit later, and then they get up into the Greek and the Roman periods at the end. I only had about 6 hours there, and it was Yeah, oh, it was taxing, it was exhausting, but you see things like Tutankhamun's gold. Um, you get to see tools that were used. I was intrigued to see that they really did use a lot of basic, simple tools, chisels and mallets, and the plumb bob, and basics, but use them very effectively. I wanted to put a picture in of Saladin's citadel, dating 1100 AD, because as a history teacher, I always found the relationship between Saladin and Richard the Lionhearted to be interesting. Richard the Lionhearted led the crusade to attack and reclaim Jerusalem, and he got to Egypt and decided to attack Saladin. I think he spent 3 years trying to attack the walls here, but you can see the walls are pretty tough to attack if you're on the outside. The guys inside with rocks and arrows are able to repel quite readily. Um, One of the unsubstantiated stories is that Saladin called down to ask Richard Lionheart, "What is it you're here for? What do you want?" "Well, we want access to the Holy Land. We want to have access to Jerusalem." Now, and again, it's an unsubstantiated story, but Saladin has suggested, well, we'll arrange for you to marriage of a beautiful Arab woman. I'll give you Jerusalem as a wedding present. And Richard Lionheart said, "Oh no, we got to fight for it." And so they fought for 2 more years. He finally went home. We call him Richard Lionhearted. We don't know what to make of Saladin. But when you're at the edge of the citadel looking across Cairo back toward the pyramids, if, well, there was a brief moment where I could see a pyramid back in here, but the smog was so heavy, 23 million people living in that community. The smog was so heavy on this day that my eyes watered and it was painful. The next day, we had a wind that came through and had blue skies. So periodically, they get to breathe. Annika arranged for us to have this remarkable resort to spend a couple of nights in. Beautiful place. And so, yeah, it was amazing how she was able to sort out such remarkable places for us. And then to be able to go places that were fascinating. The West Bank is the Bank of the Dead, but the City of the Dead is on the East Bank. And here in this City of the Dead is one of the old vaults for the dead. It's been remade into a home and business. And the gentleman who runs this glass shop is was a professional boxer, but here he's now a professional glass maker. And so here's our group enjoying the glass making. But it's interesting that they're using the old burial sites for the City of the Dead as living quarters today. Just another of the many markets along the city streets. Just a fascinating thing to see how many people were at the market. And then we got to go to the papyrus factory. And here is a stem of papyrus. And then we have a lot of papyrus examples along the walls. And many of our people picked up some. I think Jeannie got nice pieces of papyrus. I didn't. But yeah, just fascinating to see the significance of papyrus holding the records of the hieroglyphs for thousands of years. And our tour took us to where Jesus had been kept. Fascinating to see that the Egyptians have followed the trail of where Joseph and Mary would have come with Jesus when he was a baby. And we got to a Coptic church where they claim he was kept for 3 months, and you can see the carving on the wall there. They're very proud of the fact that they have a cave which Jesus stayed for 3 months while he was a child. And they also have a piece of the cross on which he was crucified, according to their account. It is interesting that I've read about the pieces of the cross previously and find that if you assemble all of them, you'd have a forest. But it's interesting how people claim icons. The tree of life portrayed on the floor of one of the big museums was fascinating to me. They had a light show that was able to reflect many of these symbols of Egyptian life there. But just simply looking across the city and recognizing the power of the desert. And there you see some of those 20-story buildings in the background. Power of the desert, and yet the power of people to want to live in a place where, well, where there's lots of goods. You take a look in the shops and they're just full of stuff. And so we got to go to the old market. And in that old market, I wandered into a place like this and got into a back room. I was looking at some alabaster and quite intrigued by it. And our guide, Ahmed, came and touched me on the shoulder and shook his head, noting this was Chinese, fake. Don't wait until you get to the real alabaster mine farther south. It's just very interesting to see the old market and how plentiful the goods were there. We had a group of people that stopped at a little restaurant there, and I'll get to that again a little bit later. But here again, I've mentioned the building on building on building, and you can see multiple constructions here that have used parts of old buildings in the construction of that wall. And there's a kiln off to the right here. This is a place where you have a Christian Coptic church and a Muslim mosque and a Jewish temple all within a block. Okay, I mentioned the spot where we stopped for drinks, and I got this drinks menu, and I looked at the hot drinks, I looked at the fresh juices, I looked at the soft drinks. Shisha corner, I didn't know what that was, so I decided I'd order one of those. And it was a hookah. I innocently didn't, I thought it was a drink, but it was actually tobacco or hashish or something of the sort that they brought out to me for as a pipe. And so my group got a good laugh at my expense on that one.
We had a good time because he didn't know what it was, and when they brought the pipe around, he didn't know what to say about that either. So we laughed, but he sent the pipe back.
And we did get some good drinks. The fruit drinks, they were very nice, and I did enjoy those. All right, let me see if I can get to the next stage. Note. Pyramids, Karnak. I think I need to stop sharing and then start sharing again. Because I have so many slides, trying to get them all compiled together, just not quite realistic. But hopefully this one will give me a slideshow, play from the start. And you should see the obelisk of Queen Hatshepsut standing nearly 30 meters tall. And going up the river to Karnak and seeing this awesome sight was just, it was remarkable. It was fun. It was fascinating, but so much to see. And so let me give you a few glimpses of it because it's just not possible to get a good review of it on the ground. And so let me try to show you a little bit inside. It has the Hall of the Columns, and there's just a wealth of them. I've got the figures here somewhere, and I'll get to those, but you can see that they're individually carved with low relief, and the whole it's a monstrous temple, just huge, and each of those columns covered with hieroglyphs, telling the story here of Seti and Ramses. You have 7 Ramses, but Ramses the second is the one that gets the most attention. This is the Avenue of the Sphinxes, which is a ceremonial path that was lined with the ram-headed sphinxes, and it connected Karnak with another temple. I think it was several miles away, and just seeing that the exquisite workmanship, the amount of workmanship gone into this temple was just phenomenal. And again, the granite, when you're looking at this limestone chunk, I mean, that's a piece of granite. The granite has been brought down from Aswan, which is another 100 miles up the river. But to pick up a chunk of granite like that and carry it 100 miles is a bit of a task. And so I was intrigued to see that they had granite altars and then granite obelisks, just all kinds of remarkable stuff here. There were 134 of these massive sandstone columns arranged in 16 rows. And the central 12 columns here stand over 20 meters high. And then they have papyrus capitals on top. It's just a phenomenal workmanship. But this to celebrate the beginnings of the new kingdom. The new kingdom. Seti was the pioneer in the new kingdom, and then his son Ramses the second is the one that ruled for 66 years. He's the one that's given credit for subduing the Asians as well as the Nubians. But here's a map of that temple, the Temple of Ammon at Karnak. And you can just, well, here's your columns in the center part. It is just simply huge. It's 200 acres. If they give you a chance to comprehend. I mean, my farm west of Lamoni is 240 acres. And to have one temple fundamentally the size of our farm was just awesome. And so, yeah, just wow. But these guys had big egos and needed to be able to celebrate. Here I picked up an outside picture with an aerial view so you can see the entry door here coming in from the east, and then the temples with the columns in the middle. And then there's a lake. They built a lake here, which is part of that complex. It was there for the bathing, and this served as the spiritual heartbeat of Thebes for 2,000 years. And the construction lasted all the way into the Roman period. So, yeah, they continue to work on it and build it, expand it. But it's just remarkable to see the worship center that Karnak really was. And then, of course, because you have so much doing and redoing, here you see the demolition process of some of the holes in the stone, replacing the previous faces and putting new faces on. And again, to see those obelisks out of granite, wow, what a bunch of work to make those things. And interesting here, I think, to see that we're talking about Ozymandias. Any of you that are of the literary background will appreciate that Shelley wrote a poem about Ozymandias. And I think I've got that poem handy here, maybe. Well, I'll come to it at the end, maybe. But he talks about the legs in the sand of the pharaoh that is going to be the pharaoh for all the world, all of history, and all we have is just the legs left in the sand. But it's just a huge and remarkable complex. And looking back toward the complex from the will be the west side of the lake. That lake is 120 by 77 meters. And so pretty good bathtub for the priests. And then you can see in the foreground here that they've done some recent archaeology. And of course, I was very much interested in that. And there's more of the current archaeology going on, exposing more of the temple exposed. I mean, the temple has been largely excavated, the sand cleaned out of it, but the ongoing process you can see is still right here. And it was just Karnak is one of those remarkable places where it's one of the largest, most significant temples in world history.
Paul, can
Yeah.
you go back? Can you go back to the last picture? Is this the obelisk that the queen ruled and her son or nephew or somebody didn't like what she was doing, so he she told him he couldn't change anything, couldn't ruin anything. So instead of ruining anything, he built walls totally around this obelisk so that nobody could see it. He didn't ruin it, he just didn't let anybody else see it. And I thought, they're still living like us.
Yeah, fascinating stories. Yeah, thank you, Jeannie. All right. Just a couple more there, and let me get moved on. Um, our people were astounded by it. It's just too much to take in one look. We had gotten up early in order to be able to get there before the crowds, before the rush, and our guides got us up early so that we could do that almost every day. And so that meant getting up at 4 o'clock in order to be there before the crowds got there. But in this case, the crowds would get there, and I was able to get a good shot at the strata in that particular stone. But then, by the time we left, here's the parking lot, 20 buses in sight right here. Just a vast array of interest. And so then we went to a gold place to see some of the finery, and that was most intriguing for me because I saw that to have Rena's name on a cartouche would be neat, and so there it is. Rena's name's on the left, and Paul's name's on the right, and they both got on that cartouche so that I could wear that between our wedding rings around my neck. And as a boy, I found myself intrigued by the dung beetles. I would walk barefoot behind the cows, chasing them from the pasture to the barn for milking. And as we walked up the lane, there would be dung beetles rolling up the cow pies into little round balls. They would roll up in the dust. The sun would bake them. I would pick them up and play marbles with them. And I was really rather fond of the dung beetles because they made such nice marbles. Well, in my older age, discovered that there's 1,000 different species of dung beetles, and around the world they have a remarkable task of spreading the manure to make it so the next generation can be fertilized. And in Africa, where you have elephants that make piles that are 3 or 4 feet deep, the dung beetles are the ones that spread those piles out and try to fertilize for the future. And so dung beetles are really neat creatures, and the Egyptians celebrated them and put them as one of the more honored creatures in their pantheon. And here, I believe we're looking at the place where we found the aromatherapy. I'm just amazed to discover that our guide Ahmed at one point got us in a room where he had translated the hieroglyphics and found that the hieroglyphics were actually the prescriptions to cure ailments. And here, 5,000 years ago, they were putting the prescriptions to cure ailments on the papyrus, on the walls. And here was a gentleman with 90%, 95% capability of reading the hieroglyphs, able to translate. And I was intrigued because at one point he highlighted that mint was a very good means of addressing problems of the respiratory system. And I had gone with a respiratory problem, and so I got some hot water and put some mint in it, and it was amazing. It just cleared up my respiratory problem. Just the Egyptians 5,000 years ago had an awful lot of apothecary skills that I think we have not given him appropriate credit for. Well, yeah, this is Karnak again. I'm sorry, I didn't get all my slides lined up just right, but there's another of those neat obelisks. And you see the guards, the oversized. I mean, these rulers. In this case, we're talking about Ramses being portrayed as a superhuman. And interesting how our people with big egos like that. Ahmed is our guide in the background there, and telling us the stories of what went on in that particular temple. And I'm going to get us beyond that. We got to ride one of the riverboats up the Nile overnight, and that was a neat experience because it gave us a chance to just be on the Nile and on the water for a while. At one point, I looked up and down the river, and there were 18 of these huge boats in sight. A lot of people taking advantage of that multi-story facility. The dining room is down here on the ground floor, and then you have private rooms for the travelers on the next 3 floors. The ground floor here has the reception room, and they also had sort of a dance hall kind of a place in ours. But interesting that the riverboats carry a tremendous amount of traffic up and down the Nile even today.
Oh, Paul, when we had to get into our boat, or whatever, we had to go through the center of the 2 boats that were parked next to us. So we didn't stop at the first one we got into. We had to cross the next one, and then into the next one before we could get to our boat. And this happened several times. So it was like there's no privacy if you park on the inside. You have to be on the outside of all the boats that are parked there.
And so the boat captains have to cooperate to be able to allow people to come across.
Right.
We had the special privilege of getting a hot air balloon ride. And when we got there early in the morning for the takeoff, there were about 25 balloons going up, and another 25 balloons followed. And so there are a lot of people that were making themselves available to get the hot air balloon rides. And I didn't quite understand or appreciate how significant that was until I got up and began to look. But here you see that divide between the green fields of the Nile Valley and the adjacent desert. And when you look, you'll see there's temples strewn all about. When you look, you'll see there's places that are in process of excavation, and a lot of places where you see where the walls were, but they haven't been excavated. And so to get that higher perspective, and fortunately I was able to bring in a close up on that one. And you see the guy down in the hole, the 2 gentlemen down in the holes, and 2 more working up on the side. But here are people, I'm not sure if they're actually excavating or if they're just pot hunting, but in either case, they're working their way into subterranean facilities. And there's such a wealth. I mean, look at that. You see all of that unexcavated territory on the East Bank, and it's just phenomenal. The amount of work that's been done and the work yet to be done is phenomenal. Our balloon ride took us over, and it finally came down and crashed into the little bit of a knoll. The basket scraped off these pieces of pottery, and yeah, just here's a bunch of pottery lying there on the ground that got scraped by our basket. Nobody cares. Nobody picks it up. Nobody maps it. And so here's the archaeologist. Oh wow, what a wealth of material going to waste here. You see, there's a rim sherd here, and just fascinating to see the wealth of materials cultural materials that are immediately underfoot. And in Egypt, it's 500,000 years of human occupation. I want to get to the Kom Museum because the Kom Museum is one dedicated to the crocodile. And the crocodile becomes so significant in Egyptian history because it's such a good symbol for the pharaoh. The crocodile wakes up in the morning with the sun, comes out and suns all day, and then crawls back in the dark shallows of the night, just like the sun goes underneath. And so the crocodile is closely associated with Re, the sun god. But the crocodile is also one known for being able to grab and subdue his object, his supper, his opponents readily, and crunch them down. And so the Egyptians mummified crocodiles. They mummified them and kept them, and apparently worshipped them. And well, we find that here is a deep well that they made that apparently had crocodiles at the bottom at this particular temple site. Fascinating that they would want to keep a big crocodile down there just for entertainment. But the walls show the crocodiles being repeatedly idolized, and the crocodile is Sobek, the god Sobek, and so he looks like a human. He's a human with a crocodile head, but that's characteristic of the pharaoh because the pharaoh, like the crocodile, is able to quickly subdue his enemy and be in control. And so you see him portrayed in numerous statues and numerous of the carvings on the walls. In the museum, and there he is beside his mate. The museum of crocodiles was fascinating to me. And of course, I was almost always the last one to get out of the museums anyway, even though our group was a group of museologists. But this one was one that especially intrigued me, in part because I think there's a little bit of the crocodile in each of us. The inclination to want to grab hold and be in control, and not have to, be able to devour our opponents. And so, in thinking about that, I was particularly struck when Ahmed, our guide, pointed out that the crocodile makes the symbol, that is to say, two crocodiles together make the symbol of sovereignty. And here you see the two crocodiles on top of this stone. The crocodiles working together, not eating each other, but with their mouths closed, can provide the stepping stones by which those people who are trying to get across the river can walk on their backs and get to the promised land. Wow. How much courage does it take to walk on the back of a crocodile? And yet that may very well be exactly the call that we face to be people of peace, to learn to walk on the backs of the crocodiles, to give the people the sovereignty as we, the people of the United States, like to claim. We got to the Nubian area at the northern part of our trip by Abu Simbel. And here was a Nubian family that invited us in, and they fed us, and they had this crocodile underneath the cage on the floor. They also had a crocodile that was a little smaller that we could handle. And here it is. And I had just held it. Then there's two crocodiles in sight there, but I had passed it to Debbie, and Debbie's there in the pink, and the crocodile peed on her, and so she's telling that crocodile he's not minding his manners very well. But other people, you see, are getting a good laugh at her expense. Our Habibi family, the group that traveled together became known as the Habibi family, people caring for each other and walking on each other's back. I think there's a neat element of friendship and recognition of being people of peace together. And that's grace. So playing with a dog, the puppy, and just our people were always looking for kitty cats and puppy dogs to play with, and they found them. Come on, click. Oh, here's Jeannie walking the plank. Notice that the plank is a 2x8. But to get out of the boat, that's that was access, and so she was getting assistance. Some our younger people didn't need any assistance, but it was interesting to see that that was the actual access to the boat.
I was really happy to have their support. That water didn't look really appetizing. They were very kind.
Yes, they were very kind, and we really enjoyed the Habibi family that we got to share with for that most of that 3 weeks. The boat up and down the boat close to Aswan also had things for sale on it, and so yeah, here you see that central table. People always trying to merchandise things, and so sort of the fun to continually have opportunities to buy things. And the ladies at the Nubian family got henna on their hands. And so that picture gives you an indication of the artistic skills of the Nubian ladies to be able to decorate the hands of our American ladies. And the henna lasted about, it was pretty clear for most of a week and then washed off. Abu Simbel, just a couple of pictures of Abu Simbel before I close. Abu Simbel is the temple that was moved. Jacqueline Kennedy got involved in it. I remember back in the 60s when I was a kid reading about it in the National Geographic that Abu Simbel was being salvaged from Lake Nasser, the dam at Aswan. The Aswan Dam is 110 meters high. And it backs up water 500 kilometers all the way up into Sudan. And now they're irrigating thousands of acres of desert because of the water in that lake. But in order to save the Abu Simbel temple, they had to raise it 70 meters. And so the picture here of showing that process, I got a couple of the old pictures to show that for you, because, and here you see they're in the process of moving 20-ton blocks of stone from that lower level up onto the terrace. They actually moved the mountain to get Abu Simbel moved up there. And so it was a fascinating project, a huge project. Interesting to see that modern man can do big things too. But interesting to see how it was inspired in part by a lady. And interior, have the paintings, the statues, everything restored. It's just one of those remarkable salvage efforts that was conducted in part by Jacqueline Kennedy. So in sum, I'm showing you pictures of Saqqara, the Cheops, the Sphinx, a bit of new museum, the old museum, the Civilization Museum, Karnak, Sobek, the crocodile, Aswan, Abu Simbel, and next week we'll get to Sinai and Petra. And so that's all the slides for today. And we're at 9:04, so it's really, I came out pretty close. Questions or comments?
Okay.
Yeah. Let me assure you that next week, for me, one of the highlights of life was to climb Mount Sinai. It's just such a benchmark in life because you read about God speaking from that bush to say to Moses, take off your shoes, for the ground you're standing on is holy ground. And I have had the privilege of walking on holy ground in Polynesia, in Mexico, in Canada, in the United States, and now on Mount Sinai. And wow, to appreciate the beautiful world that's been created, prepared by Mother Earth over millions of years, so that we have a place for man and God to meet. and we're living on that place. And so for us to be able to fulfill that call to be people of peace is, I think, an awesome call. I put this before you as part of the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum, partly because the Book of Mormon comes out of the Egyptian background with the hieroglyphics modified by 600 BC. And so Blair Bryant has his hand up, probably wants to address that. Go ahead, Blair. You need to unmute.
Thank you, Paul. Egypt is on my bucket list that I don't expect to see. However, I want to know, you haven't mentioned anything about the Kings Valley tubes. Did you visit them?
Yes, I'm sorry. I whipped over that, and I'm sorry. I have another 100 slides on that area. Um, that's the beginning of the New Kingdom. And at the beginning of the New Kingdom, the pharaohs recognized that the Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom pyramids were being pirated, and so it didn't make sense to continue just putting all your riches under a pyramid where the robbers would take it in the next generation. And so they moved to the Valley of the Kings, and at the mouth of the Valley of the Kings is a natural pyramid. The natural pyramid, of course, represents that idea that 1 + 2 can equal 4. I used to give my students that little problem. I'd put pencils in the hands of 9 students, have them form three triangles. Now then, put your 3 triangles together without disrupting them, and demonstrate the one that 1 + 2 can equal 4. And they would lay them flat on the table, and they'd demonstrate that 1 + 2 can equal 7 because they'd spread them all around. But then, when they got in 3 dimensions, the 3 triangles coming together produced the 4th triangle at the bottom. And so here 1 + 2 can equal 4. The pyramid demonstrates the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. And that for the Egyptians was highly significant because, speaking of eternal life, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so at the Valley of the Kings, they had a natural pyramid. They didn't have to build one. And then they put 125 different tombs in the Valley of the Kings. I got into 3 of them. One of them was that of Tutankhamun.
Did you get into KV5?
No, I got Ramses. Wait a minute. I got Ramses 5 and 7.
KV5 was discovered in 95.
Well, there's
KV5 was discovered in 1995. And
yeah,
that one was particularly intriguing to me because it was called the Tomb of Ramses' Sons. And
yeah,
there are over 100 rooms below ground,
right.
each one dedicated to a son of Ramses, a few daughters, but most of them sons.
Yes, he had 100 sons and I think 60 daughters.
And I followed that closely because Ramses was probably Ramses was probably the
You're picking up on me, Blair. Ramses was probably what?
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, Ramses was probably what?
I've got a bad internet connection here. I'm
Okay.
sorry. But
No, I did not get into that one.
Ramses had over 100 children, well over 100 children.
Yeah, at least 160. But with his first wife, I think it was only about 4, maybe 6. And she was honored as well, close to a near equal, but no man would allow a woman to be totally his equal in Egypt, although they did allow women to become pharaohs on occasion. Now, no, there are 125 tombs in the Valley of the Kings. I got into 3 of them. Getting down into the tomb is down a numerous flights of steps, and it was just exhausting to get into the tomb and then out again. To me, one of the more intriguing things was to discover that two of the architects who had made the tombs in the Valley of the Kings had tombs just outside the valley, and they were ornate. They were beautiful, not quite as difficult to get to, and so I got to visit those as well. But yes, the Valley of the Kings is something that I should have been talking about tonight. And I had it on the earlier bunch of slides, and somehow they didn't make it into what I showed you. Chris, you had a hand up.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks, Paul. Great.
I'm sorry, Blair was trying to get something in there.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead, Blair. Blair, if you're available.
yeah, I got a bad connection. I was interested in that because Ramses was the what Pharaoh probably of Moses' time, and he probably knew Moses while Moses was in the vicinity of the Pharaoh when he killed the Egyptian and went to Midian. He was 40 years in Midian before he came back from the Sinai experience. And what was the final plague? The death of the firstborn. The hundreds burials beneath that tomb, to me, were the months that died in that plague.
Wow. Interesting assertion.
Ramses II had 13 people he had designated over the years to be his successor. He outlived them, all of them down to Merenptah. And Merenptah became his successor. But he was the 13th son. He was not the firstborn. All firstborns in Egypt died, male and female. It doesn't say the men only. It says the ones that opened the womb.
Thank you, Blair, for raising that point.
Anyway,
it intrigues me because
I feel that that is a kind of a vindication of the story of Moses.
the story of Ramses II, who ruled for 66 years, includes his making an invasion of Asia. And we have a monument that shows Asian faces with their necks tied with a rope. And the script tells us that the first time in history that Ramses makes a peace treaty with the Asians. But then at the bottom, you see that he's stomping on the Asian leader, clearly controlling that issue. And then the next column, you see Ramses is in Nubia in southern Egypt, conquering the Nubians. And now you got African faces. They're tied together with rope, and he's stomping on the Nubian leader. And so your idea that the firstborn may very well, and the idea that here he ruled for 66 years and Moses was in the wilderness for 40. So there is the possibility of a corollary there. And for Moses to go to Sinai, to the Mount twice.
Well, Ramses had quite a harem.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he had one primary wife.
Ramses had quite a harem, and the firstborn of every one would have died.
Yeah, that's, you raised very
why there are over 100 rooms.
I think it's 160 that
It's my perspective.
So thank you for raising that. It's an interesting corollary. Okay, back to Chris.
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much. You took a trip that I've always wanted to take, but may not make that one myself. I'd heard that in the heyday of the raiding of these pyramids by enlightened uh, members of civilization that there were so many mummified cats that all an educational institution had to do was write and ask for one, and that they're all over the United States and Western Europe. So that's just kind of an observation. I did have a question for you.
Let me respond to
Yep.
that quickly. There is a museum of cats that have been mummified and also one of dogs.
All right.
So, yeah, a wealth of 5,000 years of mummified cats.
There we go. I appreciate that being confirmed. So I've got a theoretical question for you. Um, having all this fresh in your memory, and the incredible pictures, and travelogue narrative. If you would speculate with me just a second, if Joseph Smith had had a chance to go to Egypt, what kind of impact do you think that would have had on him?
Wow, what a fascinating question. The fact that he was so interested in the mummies that he acquired them for his mother to show and talk about. Then taking the papyrus and taking a stab at translating speaks of his deep personal interest. But for him to go catch a chunk of reality would have been awesome. and and for him, he was shortly after the deciphering of the beginning of the deciphering of the hieroglyphics, and so that was clearly something being published in his time and something that he was interested in. The question of how could his translation stand up against that of the academics? I find that curious. I think that for him to see the temples, for him to see the pyramids, for him to see the Sphinx, for him to appreciate the massive history there, and because there's so many gods being celebrated, how do you reconcile belief in one God to all of those gods that were 5,000 years behind that civilizational development? And so his whole concept of restoration, I suspect, would have been modified if he'd had that kind of a chance. Yeah, you raise a fascinating question. Joseph Smith's worldview, I mean, it's clear that he was able to grasp every little bubble that came his way and try to do something with it. And to see the kinds of things that I've seen with the Rift Valley and the Dead Sea and the buildup of granite mountains in that Rift Valley, and to be able to appreciate what Mother Earth has done to prepare a place for man to meet with God, and for him then to reflect upon that Moses-God interchange. Oh, wow. I can't help but feel that the inspirations that I felt he would have probably magnified even more.
Well, he had this interesting history of, to use a term kind of from my tradition, of discerning his way, and what he is impressed by and where he will draw the lines at. And you've responded very well to my query. Yeah, I mean, he strikes me as having visited Egypt virtually, if you will, but he had not visited Egypt in the flesh. And so thanks for that. That's one of the things that struck me about the presentation. And since this is a Book of Mormon perspectives, I thought I would tie it back in a little bit my own self.
Thank you. Now, I haven't emphasized the fact that the characters do have Egyptian roots, and so therefore there's a direct tie. And the simple fact that we're talking about people who came out of the Middle East with that book is another very strong tie. So there is a connection here that I don't think needs to be particularly emphasized for this group. But for my Habibi family, if there's anybody on that, that probably needs to be clarified. Thank you, Chris, for the question. Others? Well, I didn't keep up with her. There's Joetta and Brent. John Sauer. James Lucas. Next week, I'll get to Sinai and Petra. And both of those proved to be awesome experiences for me. But it's just been a trip of a lifetime, one of those kinds of things that you never quite anticipate you're actually going to get to pull off. But the experience of being on Mount Sinai has been a lifelong dream, aspiration, and let me just give you a hint on that, because when Rena passed almost 3 years ago, she came back after 2 months and said, "Tell them, don't forget to love each other." So I carry that message with me all the time. And on Mount Sinai, to see that I'm where the Jews refer to Yahweh, YHWH, the breath of the divine that gives life. And the Muslims say Allah, the breath of the divine that gives life. And the Christians say, I am, the sanction for not just breath, but all that exists. That everywhere we touch our feet upon the ground is holy ground. For I am is in everything. And for me to come down the mountain, I'll tell you that story next week. It was a painful experience for me in many respects. My bottom was bleeding by the time I got to the bottom. But my mind, my soul was lifted up to say, we need to breathe a bit of love with every breath we take. When we can breathe in and breathe out a bit of love with every breath we take, then we become the people of peace that we are called to be. For me, that profound message from Mount Sinai is a capstone on life. And we're approaching 9:30, so I guess maybe time to, but surely, I want to go back to the crocodiles. I brought a couple of them here. There, now you can see the crocodiles. They have the crocodiles gobbling each other up. That's pretty harsh. But if you get those crocodiles to close their mouths, then you can walk on their backs. Sovereignty is two crocodiles putting their heads together in the hieroglyphics. It can be cobras, because the pharaohs use the cobra as well as the crocodile. But the crocodiles struck me as being so symbolic of who we are. For I think we have a bit of that crocodile in us that is inclined to want to gobble up. And yet, if we can get our mouths to be contained, if we can look together and be friendly toward each other, provide our backs as stepping stones for the future people to be able to walk across and get across that deep river. Months ago, I was using Deep River as my concluding song, because that Negro spiritual speaks of the deep river in which, well, if you got the crocodiles on it, how do you get across? but at least help me get across the campground was the spiritual plea. We really wanted to get across the promised land, but if we can't make it to the promised land, at least help us make it to the campground. But let us get across that deep river. And so let me conclude tonight. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Oh Lord, I want to go to the promised land, the promised land, a place and people of peace. Oh, deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. And even if I have to walk on the backs of crocodiles, even if I have to tie their mouths so that my children can walk on their backs, we will learn to do that. We'll learn to be people of peace that can navigate our way across the deep river on the backs of the crocodiles to be in the promised land of peace. That's the divine call. That is the divine call. We are to be people of peace. Good night.
Thanks again, Paul.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the good questions and kind attention.